Hi, I'm Dorian. 3 months ago, I left the bank with a smile on my face. The company was finally mine. But as I walked up the porch, I heard laughter inside. My father, my brother, and my mother. The woman who once told me I was the only reason this family stayed together. She said, "We'll make him sign it all back tomorrow." That's when I stopped being their son and started becoming their consequence. They taught me loyalty. I learned documentation. You want to know how far a family will go when they're not really family anymore? Then keep watching. The road home always felt longer when the sun started sinking behind the pine trees. That evening, the sky over Dallery had turned the color of copper, glowing just enough to make the asphalt shimmer. My hands were loose on the steering wheel, a habit I'd picked up from too many late drives home after long days at the company. But this one felt different. I wasn't just heading home. I was heading back with good news. After years of working through the legal mess, the company shares were finally mine. All the forms, the signatures, the endless waiting. It was over. I could already picture Dad's face, that half smile he used to give when he was proud but didn't want to admit it. And Mom, she'd probably tear up a little, talk about how her baby boy finally made it. Elias, my brother, might crack one of his dry jokes about me turning into the serious one. It would be good. For once, it would all be good. The old 2-story house came into view as I turned onto the gravel drive. The porch light was already on, warm and steady, like it had been my whole life. I slowed the truck, parked near the steps, and killed the engine. The quiet hit me first. Then laughter drifted out through the open window. Familiar voices, light and easy. I smiled, resting my palm on the envelope sitting on the passenger seat. "Finally," I whispered, more to myself than anyone. The night air was mild, carrying the smell of honeysuckle from Mom's garden. I climbed out of the truck, boots crunching on the gravel. The house looked exactly the same. The rocking chair by the door, the porch swing creaking slightly in the breeze, the faded welcome mat that said, "Home is where the heart is." I thought about how many times I'd walked up those steps, how many times I'd told myself that no matter how far things went wrong at work, this place would always be steady, safe. Then, as I reached the top step, I heard her voice. "We'll make him sign it all back tomorrow." It came out soft, almost kind, the way Mom always sounded when she was settling something important. I froze. My hand tightened around the envelope. Dad's low chuckle followed. "He won't even argue. Never has." Then Elias, with that tone he used when he thought he was being clever, "He's too good-hearted to fight us. You just have to say it's what's best for the family." The words slid into me like cold rain. I didn't move, didn't breathe. It was as if the world had narrowed to that one patch of porch light, that one open window. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misheard. But then Mom spoke again, calm and sure. "He won't see it coming. He trusts us." Something cracked inside me. Quiet, invisible, final. I looked down at the envelope in my hand. The paper had bent under my grip. It had my name on it, bold and official, the kind of thing I used to dream about as a kid. Now it felt like a joke. My whole chest felt hollow, as if someone had scooped everything out and left only the echo of that laughter coming from inside. My first thought was to walk in, act normal, play dumb until I figured out what to do. But my legs wouldn't move forward. They only knew how to step back. I eased down the porch steps, slow and careful, afraid the boards might creak and give me away. Back at the truck, I sat in the driver's seat without turning the key. The porch light was still glowing, soft and golden, spilling over the yard like it always had. I used to think that light meant home, safety, warmth, belonging. Now it looked like a stage light, shining over a scene I wasn't supposed to see. So that's what love sounds like when it's convenient, I muttered. My voice didn't even sound like mine. Inside, the laughter rose again, fading into the night. I pressed the envelope against the dashboard, staring at it. The words on the front blurred through my tears, though I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to cry over people who'd planned this. Not tonight. I sat there long enough to watch the light bugs come out and the porch light flicker once, twice, then steady again. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and the world went on like nothing had happened. I started the truck but didn't drive right away. My hands were shaking, the paper still trembling between my fingers. I glanced back at the house, that warm, ordinary house where every good memory I had just been rewritten in a single sentence. "The light's still on," I whispered, "but not for me." I put the envelope on the seat beside me, still sealed, still untouched, and backed out of the driveway. The gravel crunched like bones under the tires. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't even glance back. The road ahead was dark and empty, but at least it was mine. By sunrise, I wasn't angry anymore. Just awake. I'd parked a few blocks down from the house last night and slept in the truck. Or maybe just sat there with my eyes closed. I couldn't tell the difference. My back ached, my shirt clung to me from the humidity, but my mind was razor sharp. Not in a panicked way, in the way that comes after you've seen something you can't unsee. The house looked untouched by what I knew now. Morning light poured across the kitchen like nothing happened. The porch, the siding, even the hummingbird feeder still swinging outside the window. It all looked soft, familiar. Deceit wears the prettiest masks. I slipped in through the side door. Coffee first. That's what they'd expect. I moved slow, steady, pretending muscle memory was all that drove me. Filter in, grounds measured, pot started. The smell hit me like a memory I didn't want. I leaned on the counter and stared out the window, the glass catching my reflection. I looked older than I had yesterday. Footsteps overhead. Floorboards creaked. Another set followed. Then the hush. That thick, tense quiet you only hear when people are making sure their secrets stay folded. Mom entered the kitchen wearing her usual soft pink sweater, the one she always put on when she was trying to appear more approachable. She smiled like I'd just come back from the grocery store. "Well, good morning, sweetheart," she said cheerfully, too cheerfully. "You were up early." "Didn't sleep much," I replied, stirring the coffee even though it didn't need it. Elias strolled in right after, barefoot, smirking like he'd just woken from the best nap of his life. "The prodigal son returns," he muttered, patting me on the back. "Hope you're not still mad we ate without you last night." "Not at all," I said, keeping my tone level. "I'm sure you had your reasons." Mom moved toward the stove, flipping pancakes. "I thought we'd do a proper breakfast. Just us." Her eyes darted quickly to Elias, then back to the griddle. I sat down at the table, hands folded, watching them. The entire scene played out like a performance I wasn't supposed to be awake for. The glances, the phrasing, the careful, artificial ease. Elias poured orange juice. "You get that envelope filed yet?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Long day yesterday." He nodded slowly, sitting across from me. "Well, maybe don't rush it. You know how these things go. Mom's actually been thinking about a different structure for everything. Could be worth talking to the lawyer again. Maybe today. I stared at him, watched how he avoided eye contact when he said it. I saw it then, the plan already moving behind the scenes. They hadn't wasted a minute. Of course they hadn't. That's so, I said calmly. Mom chimed in, back still turned. Just ideas, honey. We just want what's best for everyone. You know how complicated these things can get when emotions are high. My stomach turned, but I forced a smile. Yeah, emotions. Can't let those get in the way. They thought I was swallowing it. They thought the quiet meant I hadn't heard a damn thing. They think silence means surrender, I thought. I took a bite of the pancakes. They tasted like betrayal, warm, sweet, and forced down out of habit. Elias drummed his fingers on the table. Mom folded napkins, humming a church hymn under her breath. We sat there like actors pretending to be a family, playing our parts perfectly. After a few more pleasantries, weather, gas prices, someone's cousin having a baby, I excused myself. Said I had to go check in at the office. No one stopped me. No one even asked what I was working on. Out front, the company truck sat in the same spot I left it, gleaming a little from the early sun. The Pike Logistics logo stretched across the side. The same design I'd stayed up nights refining. The name I'd made stand for reliability across 3 counties. And here I was, about to be erased from it by the very people I'd built it for. I leaned against the hood and let the heat from the metal ground me. The anger was there, under everything. But it had cooled, hardened. I wasn't going to throw a fit. I wasn't going to demand an explanation. They'd already shown me who they were. Now I needed to show them who I could be. I got into the truck, turned the key, and checked the mirror. The porch light was still on, faint, flickering a little against the morning. It never turns off, does it? I muttered. Maybe that's the point. The light never turns off because some things are meant to keep you awake. Before you fight back, you learn to listen. That's what I told myself driving toward the company office that morning. The road was lined with oak trees that had started shedding leaves early, and they scattered across the hood as I pulled into the parking lot. I hadn't been back since the paperwork was signed, the day everything was supposed to change for the better. Funny how that worked out. The Pike Logistics building looked as solid as ever, pale brick, dark windows, and that heavy glass door with our family name engraved across the front. I used to feel proud walking through it. Today, it felt like walking into a stranger's house uninvited. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and toner, familiar, sterile, safe. 2 receptionists, both newer hires, smiled politely but not warmly. One of them whispered something to the other as I walked past. Elias must have told them to keep their distance. I could read it in their eyes. That's him. The one they say isn't right anymore. It's strange, I thought. You build something with your hands, and one day you walk in and feel like a guest. I made my way down the main hallway, passing framed photos of company milestones, ribbon cuttings, award ceremonies, charity drives. Every single one of them had Elias front and center, grinning like he'd built it all himself. I stopped at one, a photo from the early days. And there I was in the corner, half out of frame. A quiet man in a loud family. Voices echoed from the conference room ahead. I paused when I recognized Elias's laugh, that smooth, calculated kind. I moved closer, staying by the half-open door. I'm telling you, we need to move fast, Elias said. He's not stable. Ever since Dad's stroke, he's been unpredictable. We can't risk the company on sentiment. Another voice, one of the board members, Tom Blake, hesitated. But Dorian's always been steady, hasn't he? Elias chuckled softly. Steady, sure, but not sharp anymore. He's emotional, makes poor calls. Mom's worried about him. We all are. The words landed like small, clean cuts. I gripped the door frame, breathing through the quiet sting. They'd planted it early. A story about my supposed instability. A slow burn of rumor until it turned into fact. I stepped back, careful not to make a sound. My pulse thudded against my ribs, steady and controlled. Not anger, not yet. Just understanding. A familiar voice called from down the hall. Dorian? It was Anna Ruiz, one of our oldest employees. Mid-50s, sharp eyes, kind heart. She'd been here since the beginning, back when Elias barely showed up before noon. She glanced around, lowered her voice. You shouldn't be here right now. They're meeting with the auditors. I know, I said. I just needed to see the place. She hesitated, then motioned me toward her small office. Once inside, she shut the door. Look, I don't know what's going on, but you deserve to know something. I frowned. What is it? She handed me a manila folder, old and creased. These were internal memos from 2 years ago. Elias started transferring client lists to a separate account under his name. He called it a backup system. Your mother approved it. My throat went dry. 2 years? She nodded. They said it was a safety net, just in case you ever stepped away. I sat there in silence, the fluorescent light humming above us. So this wasn't a spontaneous betrayal. It was a blueprint, years in the making. Every kind gesture, every reassuring word, all part of a long con to ease me out quietly. Anna placed a hand on my shoulder. I shouldn't be telling you this, but I thought you'd want to know. I managed a faint smile. I do. Thank you, Anna. Driving home later, the air felt thicker than before, like the sky itself was pressing down. Every mile was filled with memories I didn't want. Years of staying late at the office, fixing problems Elias had caused, believing Dad when he said, "You and your brother balance each other out." The words from Mom echoed next. Elias will carry the family name. You'll make sure it survives. At the time, I thought it was pride. Now I realized it was a sentence. A life of service disguised as love. That night, I sat in my home office. The desk lamp cast a circle of light over my paperwork. I didn't pace, didn't drink, didn't call anyone. Instead, I opened a blank notebook and started writing. Dates, names, details. Every transaction, every odd meeting, every client that had shifted from my portfolio to his. If they want to play a game, I thought, I'll learn every rule. Then I connected the external hard drive and began copying all the company data I still had access to. Every email, every ledger, a quiet insurance policy. When the last file finished transferring, I sat back and stared at the screen. My reflection looked calm. Too calm. Some people fight with anger. I've learned to fight with silence. And silence, when used right, doesn't echo. It absorbs. It waits. And that morning, it was my only weapon. 2 days had passed since Anna handed me those files. Since I backed up every relevant document and tucked the drive away like it was the only thing still loyal to me. I hadn't said a word to Elias or Mother in that time. I didn't need to. I let my absence do the talking. Now I sat at the end of the long mahogany boardroom table, my chair angled just slightly off-center. It was subtle, but enough to send a message. I wasn't here to play by their rules. The others filtered in slowly. Mr. Keller, our family's attorney for the last 15 years, walked in first, nodding like he hadn't helped orchestrate my quiet erasure. Elias followed, suit jacket open, too casual for what he was about to try. And then came Mother, wrapped in a blue shawl that looked soft but heavy. She gave me the same polite smile she'd offer to a stranger in church. No one sat in the middle seat. That used to be mine. "Morning," Elias said, setting his leather folder down. "Glad you could make it, little brother." I gave a slow nod. "Wouldn't miss it." He smiled, too wide. "This shouldn't take long. Just a little housekeeping." Mr. Keller cleared his throat and passed a printed packet to each of us. His voice was even, rehearsed. "We've drafted a restructuring proposal, purely for administrative clarity. It temporarily assigns voting rights back to Marjorie and Richard. Stability during transitional periods is standard in companies of this size." I didn't respond. I flipped through the pages, not really reading. I already knew what it said. Mother sipped her coffee, calm as ever. "It's just to ensure everything stays on course. No surprises." I could hear the sugar stirring against porcelain. That sound used to mean comfort. Now it was just a clock ticking. Elias leaned forward. "Of course, we want you involved. You'll still have your seat, your salary. You just won't have to worry about the burdensome stuff." The burdensome stuff, that's what he called control. I closed the folder gently. "Interesting," I said. All three looked up. "I'll have my attorney review it before I sign anything." Silence. A real one. Not the awkward kind. The heavy, loaded kind. Mr. Keller blinked. "Of course. There's no rush." Elias tried to laugh. "Come on, Dorian. We're family." I met his eyes. "Exactly." That was when it happened. Mother's hand trembled just slightly as she placed her cup down. The spoon clinked against the rim. A small sound, but it cracked the mask. I saw it. She knew I knew. "I wouldn't want to rush something this important," I added, my voice steady. "Especially after how long you've all been planning it." Elias's smile stiffened. "What are you implying?" I smiled too. "Nothing. I just appreciate all the effort behind this transition." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. But the shift was immediate. Mr. Keller began rearranging his papers like they were out of order. Mother glanced down and didn't speak again. And Elias, for all his bravado, wiped his brow once, just once, but enough for me to notice. Silence does what anger never could. It makes them listen to what they can't control. The meeting wrapped 15 minutes later with no decisions made. They said we'd reconvene next week, once I had time to think. But I wasn't buying time. I was buying clarity. That evening, I drove home slow. No music, just the hum of tires on old pavement. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked peaceful again. Same soft lights, same shadows stretching across the lawn. But everything had changed. Inside, I heated leftovers and sat at the kitchen table alone. Halfway through dinner, the power flickered off, just for a second. I didn't move. When the lights returned, I lit a candle anyway. Its flame danced quietly, casting long, flickering shadows against the wall. I whispered to no one in particular. Every light has its shadow. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. They had been warned. What came next was no accident. By the time Friday rolled around, the house felt quieter than usual. Not empty, just emptied out. Like whatever had once lived in the walls had quietly packed its bags and moved on. That night, I skipped dinner, poured a black coffee instead, and shut the door to my home office. The desk light buzzed faintly above a spread of old company files. Some yellowed at the edges, others fresh from last week's meetings. I stared at them the way a hunter studies tracks in the snow. The paper trail was there. I just had to follow it. Funny thing about trust, it makes you lazy. And in this family, laziness meant paperwork left untouched, signatures left lying, and secrets buried under routine expense reports. They thought no one would look twice. That was their mistake. They taught me loyalty. I learned documentation. I flipped open the first binder, the one labeled Q4 Logistics Fleet. My initials were on every margin, every correction, every hard decision Elias had once skipped over. It was all there. Invoices, shipment data, fuel logs. But deeper in the stack, something didn't sit right. Vehicle maintenance expenses logged under vendors we never used. And when I cross-referenced those with company bank transfers, the numbers didn't add up. I leaned back, fingers steepled, my mind clicking into place. That's when I called Anna. She showed up at my door an hour later, quiet, alert, carrying her laptop like it was a lifeline. We hadn't worked directly in years, but she was one of the few people in that building who still looked me in the eye. She didn't ask why I'd called, just nodded and sat down beside me. I need to cross-check every vendor Elias approved in the last 6 quarters, I said. And if you see anything tagged special projects, flag it. She didn't blink. You think he's been moving assets? I know he has. I just need it airtight. We worked for hours, side by side, screens glowing, file after file, transaction after transaction. One document led to another. One lie opened the door to 3 more. And when it all came together, it looked less like incompetence and more like strategy. They started this before your dad got sick, Anna said, voice low. Back when your mom started pushing Elias to grow into leadership. That's when the changes started. I paused, then slid open my desk drawer. Inside was a small USB drive, sleek, matte black, no markings. The same one I'd used to back everything up since the week began. I turned it over in my palm before typing out a single word across the folder. Truth. No drama. No threats. Just the facts. I got up, walked to the bookshelf behind me, and reached for the old leather Bible my mother used to keep in the living room. The one she made me swear on before I left for college. I flipped past the birth records, past the notes she'd scribbled in Psalms, and tucked the drive into the hollowed spine where the binding had frayed. For once, I muttered, it'll hold something true. Anna looked at me but didn't speak. There wasn't much left to say. After she left, I stayed in the office, let the silence settle. No music, no distractions. Just me, my thoughts, and a worn photo album I hadn't touched in years. I opened it slowly. On the first page, me and Elias, maybe 10 and 16, fishing poles in hand, Dad squinting into the sun behind us. Mom in the background, arms crossed, not quite smiling. There was a time I thought that photo was love. Now, I wasn't sure what it was. You raised me to protect the family, I whispered. I just didn't realize I'd need to protect it from you. The words hung in the room like smoke. Around 10:30, I sent the message to Elias. We should talk about the company's future. I've been working on something new. I waited for a reply. None came. Didn't matter. I already knew what his face would look like when he read it, and I wasn't setting a trap. I was watching how they'd try to dodge one that wasn't even there. That morning, I woke early. Not out of nerves. Those had burned off days ago. Just instinct. The house was still. Even the usual hum from the fridge sounded muffled. I stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching the breeze move the curtains like ghosts whispering secrets. Friday had arrived, and with it, the board meeting, the one they thought would seal my place quietly beneath them. Sometimes the quietest man in the room is the only one who's already read the ending. That's what I told myself as I buttoned my shirt and slipped the folder under my arm. Not the folder, just a folder. The real weight was invisible. By 9 a.m., I walked into the boardroom. Everyone was already seated. Elias sat at the head, flanked by Marjorie and Mr. Keller, our family lawyer. Dad, looking older than usual, sat slightly apart, eyes half-lidded but watchful. I didn't take my usual spot beside Elias. I chose the far end instead, just to watch. Elias leaned over and whispered something to our mother, who smiled without warmth. I caught the flick of her hand, brushing imaginary lint from his shoulder. A signal. A blessing. Maybe both. They still think I'm walking into their story, I thought. They don't see I've already written mine. The room quieted as Elias stood, clearing his throat with that practiced confidence he wore like a custom suit. We've drafted a proposal to restructure executive responsibilities, he began smoothly. Given Dorian's recent stress-related absence, and for the sake of long-term stability, we'd like to transfer certain decision-making authorities, temporarily, into a family-managed trust, just until things settle. He turned toward me, smiling like a man handing you a chair that's already been sawed through. Nothing binding yet, he added. Just a discussion. Marjorie chimed in. We just want you to rest, honey. You've been carrying too much. Let us shoulder it for a while. I leaned back, met her gaze, and nodded slowly. Rest, I echoed. That's exactly what I've been doing. Watching. Mr. Keller slid the draft paperwork across the table. I didn't even touch it. Instead, I opened my folder. Calmly. No flourish. Inside were 4 sheets. Neatly printed. Highlighted. Dated. Copies of invoices with Elias's signature authorizing client asset transfers, 2 of which were registered under shell companies our father had closed down 5 years ago. I laid the papers flat in the center of the table and spoke evenly. If you're going to take what's mine, Elias, I said, you should at least have signed the checks correctly. The silence that followed didn't just fall. It cracked the air. Mr. Keller's hand froze mid-reach. His jaw tightened. Marjorie's eyes went wide. She didn't speak, but her spoon trembled against her coffee cup. Just enough for the sound to ring out like a tiny bell of guilt. Elias stared at the papers. His mouth opened, then closed. No words came. Just a dry swallow. He started, but nothing followed. Marjorie leaned in, desperate now. This isn't what you think, Mom, I said quietly. Don't. You taught me better than that. Her lips moved, but no words escaped. Her face lost all its grace, replaced by a stunned vacancy. And then, for the first time in that room, Richard Pike, my father, spoke. Is this true? He asked, voice low, strained. The room seemed to contract around the question. Elias didn't answer. Couldn't. I asked you a question, Dad said again, a little louder. Did you sign these? Still, nothing. I stood slowly, buttoning my jacket. You asked me to trust you, I said, looking at each of them in turn. You built this company on my back and buried knives in it while I was still bleeding. I picked up my folder and stepped back. You think this is the whole story? I paused, letting the silence stretch. It's not. It's just the part I knew you'd recognize. And then I turned and walked out. No shouting, no threats, just silence. One they could chew on, swallow, and pretend wasn't choking them. As I passed the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection. Same eyes, but something deeper now. Something older. They don't know I only showed them half, I murmured, letting the weight of my own words sit with me as I stepped into the driveway. The morning air felt thin, like the calm right before lightning splits the sky. A week had passed since the boardroom fallout. No contact from Elias. No calls from my mother. Just silence. Stiff, brittle silence. Until last night. A company-wide meeting invite slid into my inbox at 10:43 p.m. Subject line, Restoring Leadership Stability. Sent by Elias. No details, no agenda. Just location and time, 9 a.m. sharp, at the warehouse. Anna called as soon as she saw it. "They're setting you up again," she said flatly. "I know," I replied. "Good. I'll give them a better ending this time." Friday morning, I pulled into the lot behind the warehouse, already packed. Inside, rows of employees lined up in folding chairs. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Elias stood at a podium, center stage, sleeves rolled, chin up, doing his best impression of sincerity. I stayed by the entrance at first, watching. He started slow. "Leadership is about clarity, not chaos," he said, voice polished. "And in recent months, our family has faced uncertainty. But I want to be clear, we're taking steps forward today." Subtle digs, each one shaped like concern. "My brother has always worked hard, but lately, he's been overwhelmed. He needs time, space, support." He gestured to our mother, seated in the front row. Her smile was soft, but her eyes were granite. "This decision wasn't easy," Elias continued, "but it's necessary, for the company, for the family." A few claps trickled in, polite, hesitant. I stepped forward, quietly. Elias froze mid-sentence as he spotted me moving up the center aisle. I didn't stop at the chairs. I kept walking until I reached the other table, where the projector sat connected to a laptop. "Before I take my leave," I said, "you should know what you've all been applauding." I took the small USB drive from my pocket, the same one I'd pulled from the hollowed Bible last week, inserted it. The screen flickered, then flashed to life. First, an invoice. Elias's signature beside a transaction to a vendor that didn't exist. Next, a scanned email, Marjorie approving a backdated contract. Then more, offshore accounts, doctored books, silent acquisitions. Every piece time-stamped, tied together, clear. Gasps rippled through the warehouse. "That's not real," Elias started, but his voice cracked. I didn't turn to face him. I didn't have to. "This is your legacy, brother," I said, steady and clear, built on my silence. He lunged for the laptop. I sidestepped. Anna was already standing near the cord, hands folded. She didn't need to speak. Her eyes said enough. Marjorie stood slowly, hands trembling, but her face held no shame, just disbelief. As if shocked not by the truth, but by my refusal to keep burying it. Mr. Keller, standing in the back, stared at the screen, lips parted. For once, he had no legal shield to offer. I stepped down from the stage and walked straight out the side door. No applause, no confrontation, just breath. Finally mine again. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the refusal to carry what isn't yours. That evening, I returned home. I took my time with dinner, simple pasta, a glass of red. No music, just the sound of the porch wind chimes clinking. Later, I walked outside. The porch light flickered, just like it had in the beginning. I grabbed a step stool, unscrewed the bulb, and replaced it. For the first time in months, the light stayed steady, but some things you leave broken. Not because they can't be repaired, but because pretending they still work does more damage than admitting they don't. It had been a week since the warehouse. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I hadn't stepped foot in the company office since. Didn't need to. The fallout wrote itself. Rumors swirled. Board members scattered. Legal consultants tiptoed through phone calls. Me? I sat on the porch every morning, same coffee cup in hand, same view of the hedges I'd been meaning to trim. For once, I wasn't planning. I wasn't fighting. I was just still. My phone buzzed on the table next to me. Again, another voicemail. Elias, his voice worn, cracked. Dorian, we need to talk. I didn't mean, look, things got out of hand. Then another. Marjorie, sharper. You've made your point. I hope you're proud. Your father hasn't spoken since Tuesday. And one from a journalist. Mr. Pike, I'd love your comment on the restructuring rumors. Your mother is still listed as an executive. Delete, delete, delete. The sun shifted, creeping across the porch like it was trying not to be noticed. The heat settled on my shoulders, but I didn't move. By late afternoon, the shadows had stretched long, and I'd almost convinced myself today might end quietly. Then I saw her car pull up. She didn't call first. Of course she didn't. Marjorie Pike didn't ask for permission. She arrived. I stayed seated as she stepped out, heels clicking on the walkway like punctuation marks to a sentence no one wanted to read. Her dress was crisp, hair perfect. The only sign she wasn't in control was how tightly she clutched her purse. Dorian, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I didn't answer. She sat beside me, uninvited, smoothing her skirt like this was Sunday brunch. Your father's not doing well. He wasn't doing well before, I replied evenly. This just stopped him from pretending. She sighed. You've always had your father's temper. I laughed, but it wasn't warm. No, I had his silence. You just never noticed when it turned into distance. She shifted in her seat, glancing toward the street. This has gone far enough. That's what people say when the truth finally costs them something. I'm not here to fight, she said quietly. I'm here to ask you to fix this. For who? I asked. Her voice cracked just a little. For the family. No, I said. For your image. For the invitations you still want to get. The donations you're still hoping will come through. Her shoulders tensed, but she didn't deny it. You could have stopped Elias, I said. Years ago. Instead, you smiled at him in boardrooms and threw me under the bus in private. You didn't just stand by. You polished the blade. Marjorie looked away, her mouth tight. Families survive by keeping things quiet. No, I said. They survive by telling the truth when it's hard, by holding each other accountable. That's not what this was. This was power, dressed up in pearls and good manners. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something real, maybe not regret, but the barest edge of understanding. I reached under the chair and pulled out a sealed envelope, thick, labeled in my handwriting. I could have taken this to the DA. I could have dragged you and Elias into courtrooms until you forgot what daylight felt like. She stared at it. I placed it on the porch railing between us. You don't have to fear me, Mom. The worst thing I can do to you is nothing. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was hollow. Marjorie reached for the envelope, then stopped. Her hand hovered trembling before pulling back. Without a word, she stood, walked to her car, drove away. The sun dipped behind the trees, and the temperature dropped with it. I sat a while longer, then picked up the envelope and carried it to the fire pit. No ceremony, no drama. I lit the edge with a match and watched it curl in on itself, blackened and finally gone. Not every truth needs to be punished. Some just need to stop existing. My phone buzzed again. Anna. You okay? She asked, voice cautious. I'm fine, I said, just tying off loose ends. You sure you won't regret it? No, regret's their language, not mine. We talked a little more, about nothing in particular, then hung up. Later that night, I stood by the window watching the porch light. The bulb I'd replaced still glowed steady. No flicker, no shadow. You can't rebuild trust, but you can build peace. And sometimes that's more than enough. 3 months later, I woke to the sound of cicadas and the gentle rustle of oak leaves brushing the window pane. The sun had just crested the hills outside Austin, painting everything in a soft gold that felt earned. My new place wasn't much, just a one-story home on the edge of town, tucked between old cedar and unpaved back roads. No security gates, no polished marble floors, just wood, stone, and silence. I made coffee slowly, letting the grounds bloom, the scent drift through the kitchen. I used to think peace came from people, I muttered as I leaned against the counter, watching steam curl from my mug. Turns out, it comes from distance. The morning passed in quiet rhythms, feeding the neighbor's dog, fixing a loose step on the porch. It wasn't the life I thought I'd have at 42, but it was mine. Every inch of it. Around noon, I checked the mailbox and found something unexpected. A letter. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. My father's. For a moment, I didn't move. Just stared at the envelope like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. I opened it at the kitchen table. Dorian, it read. I should have listened sooner. You were the one holding us together all along. I didn't see it until it all came apart. Inside was a photo, me, Elias, and Dad. We were teenagers, standing in front of our first delivery truck. The company logo had just been painted on the side. My father had his arm around both of us, grinning wide. I looked too serious even then. Elias, of course, was already hamming it up for the camera. I traced the edges of the photo, thumb grazing the faded corner where time had worn it thin. The memory didn't hurt. It didn't even sting. It just was. That afternoon, Anna dropped by. She didn't knock, just let herself in as usual, with a paper bag full of tamales and a folder tucked under her arm. You never keep your fridge stocked, she teased, setting lunch down on the counter. That's why I keep you around, I said, half smiling. We ate out back under the shade. After a while, she pulled out the folder. The lease came through. We've got the space for the coffee and bookshop. Downtown. Good, I nodded. You'll make it work. You know, she said, tilting her head, most people who invest that much money into something want their name on it. I shrugged. Legacy isn't what they remember. It's what you leave behind that doesn't need explaining. She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. You're a better man than they deserved. I didn't answer. Evening settled slow and gentle. Anna left around 7, promising to send over the architect's plans. I stayed out on the porch with a blanket and a glass of water, listening to crickets and the hum of faraway traffic. The porch light clicked on automatically. It flickered once, then glowed steady, warm, and unwavering. I looked up at it. Not the same bulb from the old house, not even the same fixture. But it didn't matter. It's not the same light, I murmured, but maybe it's better this way. Inside, the house felt different, not just because it was new, but because it had nothing to prove. No ghosts in the walls, no voices behind doors, just breath, space, and the echo of a man finally at peace. I sat down at the desk by the window. Outside, the porch light held firm, casting a soft glow across the yard. I pulled out a small notepad and wrote a single sentence at the top of the page. Sometimes family breaks you to teach you what love isn't. I paused, then added, sometimes silence saves you when words can't. And finally, and sometimes the light that used to blind you becomes the one that finally shows the way. I leaned back, watching the ink dry, then closed the notepad, stood up, and turned out the lamp. The house didn't feel dark. The porch light held steady through the window, a quiet witness to what had been lost and found. I stepped toward the door, turned back once to look around. I left with nothing they wanted and everything they couldn't take.